were to hear him, and the Pharisees and scribes murmured, saying, "This man receives sinners and eateth with them." And he spake this parable unto them, saying, and that's it. It goes so forth.
Okay. No, Who is Jesus sitting with at the table? Okay. And what kind of people were they? Sinners. People that nobody wanted to be bothered with. Okay, some of us have lived through our parts of our lives where we were not all saints. And Jesus goes to these people who doing all the wrong stuff. Do you expect to find Jesus in the midst of people who are doing wrong things? That's how he is. And what's the response to Jesus' presence? Yeah. Okay. People, there are people in the world that we tend to overlook. We don't take time with them, because we think that for some, it may be a prostitute, it may be somebody who's derelict, some man who's has not got a moral compass. We used to have people in Stanford whose reputation was so bad that people would see them walking down the street and they crossed the street. Okay. You didn't expect Jesus to be talking to them. You expected Jesus to be talking to the trustees and the deacons and the stewards. Okay, because those were the people who were supposed to know. But Jesus went to those who were sick. Said, Jesus, that I'm the doctor. I've come to be with those who are sick, not those who are whole. Okay, so Jesus meets us where we are. So none of us has to get ready for church. We don't have to get right to come to Jesus. Jesus meets us where we are. And I mean, that's talking about the love of God. He comes down from heaven and is born of a woman like every one of us and lives among regular folk. Now think about it in your mind, God living among regular folk. That's almost mind-blowing. All the stuff we've seen in our life, Jesus saw it, because that's the human condition. Okay. But Jesus was compassionate. So as church members, we're supposed to be following Jesus. So do we have time for those people? Yeah, sometimes we don't. I mean, I'm guilty too. I remember many, many years ago, we used to do something here in Bethel every summer called a Sunday school picnic. And we used to do it in the park. But this particular time, I don't know why, we did it in the basement. And the people were out in the yard. And I expected all the church members, I expected all of their friends, I expected their families. And I looked up, and there was a man who came in and said he wanted 4 plates of food because he and his family didn't have any food. I'm not sure if he was received the same way as the people who were invited. So one of the things that God calls us to do is to have compassion for other people. So we welcome those people. We make them feel good, not like they're strangers. And if the preacher had a feeling about it, then maybe somebody else did. But God calls us not to have that kind of feeling. God calls us to rejoice. I mean, that could have been a moment in his life that could have been a changing moment forever that maybe we missed. People that we see outside. I told you one of my greatest failures in life as a preacher was a boy sitting on the steps out there drinking beer out of a bottle. He was wrestling with a demon I didn't know how to handle. But we must be compassionate enough to meet people where they are and even have a word of prayer with them when they're dealing with demons we don't know about. Because we don't know, 20 years from now, that young man may come back in here and that might be his testimony. I mean, he didn't know anything about church. I mean, he knew nothing about church. He's sitting out there drinking his beer. And when I said, why are you drinking beer on the church step? He said, something wrong with it? I mean, it was a logical question. And I said to him, well, some church people drink beer, but they don't usually drink it at the church because the church is considered sacred ground. And some things we do, we don't do at church. And we had a little conversation about it. But he had a lot of things going on. He was like Legion. And when he finished, I asked him to come to church, and he literally cried and said, I want to come to church, but if the gang members find out, I'll lose my stripes. Now that blessed me, because when he said that to me, I came back to church and said to the church, we've got to get the kids before the gangs do. So that's still a mission for us as a church. How do we get our children before the gangs get them? Because they want to belong to something. And if they can't belong to us, they'll belong to them. Okay. Any questions about verses 1 through 3? Oh, okay. Welcome. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Pastor. Uh, right, the Pharisees. Why would good, solid church members complain about about a minister being in the pool hall? Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Sometimes when things like that occur, rejection all over the people. So to not that, point out what someone else is doing, or look at what they're doing. And what they do is kind of like hidden. They're okay with that. It's like hidden, but somebody that's just out in the open, hitting themselves, whether you see them as perfect or not, that kind of like, puts fear in them. You want to sort of speak.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Deacon Johnson, you were saying something? Okay. Now, the young lady said sometimes it's just a matter of projection, that we're projecting on the other people what we would be doing. Okay, so maybe the Pharisees saw Jesus with these sinners and said, ah, is Jesus really not who he said he was? He really one of those street guys and not really the Messiah or the teacher? Okay, but we have to be grounded in who we are. And if we know who we are, then we can represent Christ anywhere or everywhere would be a better way to say it. Okay. Yeah, and we do. We do. You know, what did your mama say? Birds of a feather. Yeah, and what did Jesus say about that? Jesus said, "Don't worry about what people take inside of themselves. Worry about what's in their hearts." You know, so sometimes, you know, I read a story about the bad girl in the neighborhood, and I don't know, they didn't say what she did, but she was known as the bad girl, and nobody wanted their daughters to associate with the bad girl. And one day, one of the people who felt that this bad girl was somebody to be avoided heard the car brakes screeching outside her house. And when she came out the house, she discovered that the bad girl had looked at her little girl, and her little girl ran out in the street. And the bad girl put herself between the child and the car. So sometimes we label people, and sometimes we don't know what people are going through. And the tragedy is that some of us faced with the same set of circumstances may well make the same bad choice. Okay. So again, there's room for compassion. And I have found some of the best members in the church in the bar. Okay. That's where I found them. But they came and they served the Lord well. Okay. So the thing about it is we can't judge people by where they are or by what they're doing, because behavior can change. And if we're Christians, we ought to be able to testify that we're better than we used to be. Some of us didn't even used to have a conscience. Okay. You know, I grew up on Bergen Street in Newark, New Jersey. I knew a whole lot of people who didn't have a conscience. You know, that was just what they did. Okay. They didn't know any better. But once they came to know Christ, those of us who came to know Christ, we had a different life experience and a different journey. So part of what we have to do is to understand that the church is not just a building. You are the church. So wherever you go, you're the church. So there's no place you can't go because you're the church. And don't be hypocritical. No. I lived in Saudi Arabia where nobody drinks whiskey, but they drink out these little cups all day long. And it's not whiskey till you find out it's whiskey. So we don't want to be hypocrites. You know, yes, ma'am. You know, this lesson tonight talks about that. God wants us to be perfect, not always in our behavior, but in our faith. I, like I tell people, you've heard me say it before. You driving down the street and somebody hits their brakes in front of you. You might think something before you know it. Okay. All of us get upset about stuff. But I ought to have a faith that tells me that no matter where I am, God can make a way. I ought to be able to believe that God is more faithful than I am. God's relationship with me is not dependent upon my obedience, even though I ought to be obedient because I ought to be thankful for what God has done. It's like a parent. You know, when your children are real small, you can tell them, I'm gonna spank you if you don't do right. But after a while, they get big enough, you can't tell them that. And then they do what you want because of what? They love you. Because there ain't nothing you can do with them because they're bigger than you. Okay, when they're little, you can go ahead and say, you know, you cross that street. But so God is that way. We start our journey with God by fearing the Lord, but we end it by loving the Lord. And when you love something, you don't want to hurt it. So when we sin, we hurt God. So we don't want to hurt God. We want to please God. Okay. And if you live that way, uh, old folks said, I didn't read this in the Bible, man. I got this from the old folk. They say heaven belonged to you. uh, Nisi, would you read verses 3 through 7, please? Okay. Anybody have any thoughts on the lost sheep? Yes, ma'am.
For that shows how much encounter like and that person could have been, just one step in the wrong. Yes, I have the majority, but to go after that one, that's actually very admirable on that part because it just shows how much it is, how much we invest in our salvation, and how much he loves us. Because as in the world, the logic is, we need majority. So majority says we don't have to worry about it. And to be honest with you, that one can actually cripple so bad where there is no longer just because of you being ignored. Oh,
Okay, anybody else? Okay. Yeah. Do we in our church do we ever have one that we lose? And what is our response to that one that we lose? Yes, ma'am. Bye. No, I want to know what we do. Okay. All right. What is your answer to that?
They get hurt now, but you not falling for her. So you need to pray for yourself. Get that picture. I'm not gonna tell you nothing. I'm gonna tell you how it is. I'm gonna tell you my God. I'm gonna tell you about it. You need to stop while I'm TV. With her mom, she is using her son as to say he came, so that's all I need. She is using this as her problem, but she's overjoyed to see me. I said, okay, that's enough of that. We need to talk about you trying to find where you at and where you want to go. I'm trying to give her back energy, but I'm not going to be able to tell her that what she's doing wrong. I'm just telling her that you find yourself, you can come back and very good and find what's going on.
Well, tell her, I said, come to Sunday school.
And you know also how the one can, we can prevent the one from being missing, training the 99. Because Pastor, he talks about it, like how to kill a church. If the 99 worry about themselves, worry about their salvation, but make their priority to mirror or be a representation of God, then that 99 won't go missing. Because the same way God goes after the one, because salvation is all that matters, that's their priority, we would follow in that same, mindset. So if the 99 are trained, it will be less of a hassle. And then it won't look like we are being left behind because we've done, not what we've done because you can never be finished, but we got into a place where it's enough for us to recognize that that one is actually missing rather than, oh, they're probably back on the bottom, they're probably doing this. So all we care about is their salvation. So that is a way that the 99 won't go missing. For example, Wisconsin, she, recognized that that one was missing. And it doesn't always fall on the leader of the house. Because, as a parent, you raise them up, right? You adapt to the same methods of how they raise them. So now he has, several delegates reaching out, hey, sick and shut in, how are you doing? Haven't seen you in church in a couple of times. See somebody new, hey, how you doing? How you greet them, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so we have a lot of things to learn. But the thing about it is, what happens when I've been a good member of Greater Faith Bethel Church for 15, 20 years, and I stopped coming for 3 years, and then I come back one Sunday.
Happy to see you.
And how do we express that to a person who's coming back?
Give them a hug.
How you doing? Good to
It's
see
nice
you.
to see you.
Let me give you I need to
Reject
tell
you.
you.
None of that. We've been, it's missing. Because that's not our business. That's not our business. It's just happy to see you. Happy to see you.
Just say, haven't seen you in a long time. Oh, how good to see you, good to see you. Then you know when you have it, when you walk in the room. Then when you just go there and walk away.
Y'all sounding good. Come on, y'all sounding good.
And I come in and I'm very fashionable. I have on a very expensive pair of red silk underpants, and my pants are hanging down.
But let's be realistic. That does not happen. And we become, the Pharisees, and this is one of the key elements. You gotta be that church that no matter how long you've been out, you're still the same church that, you're still the same church that member feels welcome to come back to. Because this way that God met us where we at, you gotta, just love on them where they are.
Yeah.
and leave it that, because honestly, like the biggest thing is salvation, and we talk about this in church all the time. When that day comes, they're not going to say, "Oh, you Pastor Hill, you remember Barry Faith, you remember Bethel." That doesn't matter. What did you do when God called you and He gave you your purpose? What did you do with that? Did you honor it? Did you do everything that you were supposed to do? No, you're too busy judging everybody, or tearing them down. And that person could probably be one of the best people ever to represent God. But because we showed our behind, and now that's their reflection of what God people are. And you have to be careful with that. Because how we are, they will literally stamp that as a representation of, oh, that's how Christians are. And I don't like that. That really hurts me, because literally everything that you do is the biggest reflection on what the world, because we in the church, they see us, that's nothing. But try showing all that same love here out to the people out in the streets, and then see it,
My wife and I went to a 15-year-old celebration at the Spanish church last Friday. I've never seen anything like it. It was really lovely. The little girl had, her mother bought her shoes to talk about walking in a godly way, an umbrella to be shielded by the mercy of God. I mean, it was just a number that was very, very touching. And then we went to eat. When we got to eat, there's these very cute little girls who weighed about 90 pounds, and they had on little dresses that just kind of went down a little bit, real tight. Now, they were cute, and I think they were dressed the way that teenagers are supposed to dress. But I don't know if we in the church are always open enough to rejoice when they come as they are. And again, I think we project onto that from our culture what we think that means. And it doesn't mean the same thing. Okay. So again, if we're going to be able to receive all people in the church, then we're going to have to be able to receive people from different cultures who may dress differently for church than we do. Okay. So the thing about it is, how do we become a welcoming church to welcome people into the kingdom of God? Thank you. Well, men, we're going to have to figure out how to really welcome men into the house of the faith. Because men coming into the church, first of all, is men coming to an organization that's got a whole bunch of women. And, when it comes to a man and a woman, a man ain't got a chance. The woman, they're going to lead. So the question is, how do we make men feel a part of the church and not like they just addendum to it? Because I think that, Brother Bradford was here. We had quite a few men who used to come to church, but we had to really work on nurturing men, because particularly our men, they're dehumanized on the job. They catch it everywhere they go, and they don't want to come to church to catch it. And a lot of times they have to take stuff they don't want to take, and they come to church, they don't want to be talked down to. So we have to really figure out how to make the church a welcoming place. Yes, ma'am. We live in a society that has a lot of stuff that we didn't used to have, and we have people from different places. Uh, I remember one time I got very upset because at a funeral a man came in and kept his hat on. I learned later on that where that man was from, the oldest man in the family at the funeral kept his hat on. They were taught to do that. In church, there was an act of reverence. And Reverend Allison Johnson, a young lady, helped me with that, because I said to her, that man came in my church with his hat off, but I told him to take his hat off. She said, if he was Jewish with one of those things on his head, would you tell him to take it off? Okay? So we don't have any absolute rules. Just like this church. When I first came to this church many years ago as a pastor, we used to have stewardesses standing here. And if you came to take communion and you didn't have a hat on, they put this white thing on top of your head. Yeah, well, they don't do that anymore. Okay, so things change, and we've got to be willing to change with things. Even Jesus said you need new wineskin for new wine. I'm retiring for a reason. I'm old. It's time for some young folk to come in with some new ideas who can relate to some young people, because my wineskin is kind of stiff. Okay. Yeah, it is. What I'm looking for is different. I mean, the young preachers tease me. They tell me, you can't come out the house without a towel. Okay. Yeah, Reverend Bush used to wear a little hat. Well, the thing about it is we want to make the house of God a place where everybody feels welcome. If it's more my house than it is your house, then you're a guest. Okay? And you're not supposed to be a guest. And a lot of things we get wrong. For instance, when I was younger, much, much younger, and a young lady got pregnant and wasn't married. For some reason, they didn't want to serve her communion. Okay. Well, I'm just telling you, there was a shaming experience. Okay. We don't do that anymore, but there was a time when we did it. But when I went to seminary, I sat with some Catholic priests in a class about the sacraments. And one of the things that priest said that they stuck with me. And he said, as a priest of the Lord serving the Lord's Supper, always remember, you're the servant and not the head of the table. So if you're serving the table, you don't choose who gets served. If they sit at the table, you serve them because it's not your table. Yeah, but we'll talk about that text sometimes too. Because taking it unworthy is different than, in the text of that, is different from unworthy in terms of your behavior. You know, I had a person ask me not long ago, said, Reverend Hill, I want to take communion, but I've done so many terrible things. So I had to sit down and say, communion, part of communion is that when we break our baptismal covenant, we take communion. That renews your covenant. Okay.
Now, if I may, I want to just interject. So Sunday was a perfect example that those of us from Baptist don't have a say. So our general confession that was on the monitor was not fully there. And I had us to stop and do it again. And I said, it's important because at that point, no matter what we did, as long as we confess, we said general confession that we're sinners. Now, none of us are worthy to take it. But when we say that general confession, it's almost like asking God to forgive us. And at that point, we prepare our heart and minds to receive things. So the monitors, it was gone for whatever reason, but we said that, so we have to give that support. Now, I necessarily don't always do the flesh, but that piece is the moment that we say, God, I'm sorry, forgive me what I've done. And then we take it and we pull. So that was a good example.
So that's the reason you don't have to, when you sin, you don't have to come get baptized another time. Yeah, every Christian ought to intend to do better. Now, if you're a Christian and you don't intend to do better, that's a real serious issue. Okay, we ought to intend to do better. You know, I might not do better, but in my heart, I ought to intend to do better.
We just want rituals of getting to me. That's why we take it and again. The intent is that when we get up, or when we get where we are, that we don't do better. And not, oh, I'm just gonna drink it, I'm gonna go back, be angry, be mean, be unforgivable, so I'm just take it out of it. Everybody else take it. That's called definition of the soul.
That's taking it unworthy. For instance, if I have something against you, Mother Simmons, in my heart, I'm supposed to be Christian enough to come to you and say, Mother Simmons, we need to talk. I don't need to talk in front of the whole church. Okay. Now, if you and I have really had a tough time and everybody know we don't like each other, then we need at least one other person there. Yeah, because and I mean she'll probably affirm that she knows a lot of clinical stuff, but what people say is not always what the other person hears. Okay.
Her mind is fixated on just not liking you, and she's not ready. Whatever you said, even if you have a good intention in your heart, she's going to hear everything but that. Yeah. You can say, you know what, I'm a new page, or she, I don't like you, you don't like me, and that's not what's said. And it's also,
Well, we got a secret in the church that we don't tell nobody. So that The secret is that whatever we fighting about ain't what we really fighting about. That's true. Well, I mean, you can actually love a person and not like a person. It ain't got nothing to do with what they did, you know. So you have to be real careful because I think even in marriage, people marry people they love when maybe they should have married somebody they liked.
Next Bible study.
Yeah, because you can live with somebody you like. You might not be able to live with somebody you love because they might not be likable. So we rejoice when the sheep comes. The next one is the coin. A lady has 10 coins and she loses one coin. What does she do? She looks for that coin. And where does she look? I didn't hear you. Where did she look? What about places you can't see? Like under rugs. Yeah, like rugs, underneath the rugs and stuff, or under the couch cushions or something. But she searched every place. In other words, we can't just, when we lose a member, we can't just look around. We might have to put some labor into it. And when she found it, she did what? That's right. So when we lose somebody in the church and they come back, we ought to be telling everybody how glad we are they came back. And some of us were taught wrong. Some of us were taught when somebody leave the church, just tell them we didn't need you no how. But the truth is we did need them because God planted them there. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. Yeah, we need everybody in the church. God didn't make any junk. So somebody might be in the church and they might not act like you want them to act, but God has that person in the church for a reason. And we have to love and appreciate one another because we won't be the same without that person. Okay. Yeah, but the thing about it is that even for people who come into church who intend to stay, sometimes we can create an environment where they feel differently. No, but the thing about it is just you. You have a whole lot of support in your worship community. I mean, a lot. Okay. So it's from where you are now, it's not that hard to say that. But for somebody who's not like you, um, that nobody talks to on Sunday morning, they may have a different, and that's why we're all called to engage. There's some people I sit in my seat in churches where I can see everybody. So I see some people come in, they talk to everybody. Some people don't know, hardly nobody say nothing to them. Okay, now some of that's personality, but at the same time, we have to be able to reach out to the quieter people because some people are just plain shy. You know, that's who they are. They're not trying to be themselves. They just don't do that. You know, so we have to make the church the kind of place that everybody is welcome. And the first thing of this lesson is to rejoice when we lose one and we find that one and bring it back. But we don't wait for that one to come back on their own because the sheep who left didn't always leave because they was a bad sheep. Sometimes they were just eating grass and everybody else kept moving and they had their head down. But they looked up and everybody was gone. Now, this is the good one, the parable of the son. Yeah, we should go try to find them and finding them means really finding them. I don't mean the kind of thing where we just kind of politely say something, but to really be concerned. And one of the things that happened to me one Sunday in this church, which was a blessing, I said hello to a lady who's a member of the church. I was the pastor. I said, "Good morning, Sister So-and-so. I'm glad to see you." Lady stepped back and looked at me and said, "No, you're not." And I looked at the lady and I said, "Give me a minute." And then I apologized to her. I told her, "You're right." And I told her I felt bad. I'm the pastor and you had to tell me the truth. Okay. But that started a different relationship because it was rooted in something that was real and not something that was polite. Okay. So again, it's not saying the right words, it's really having the right place in your heart.
Should you keep asking a person, every time you see this person, they say they come here, you come to church Sunday, you come to church. Well, I'm coming, I need this. Should you keep?
I would change my speech. Say, "Girl, you missed out." I'm coming to you, Reverend.
And you could also just keep the person that they'll be comfortable to come to church. Because it's like the thing is, one of the things I've always recognized, a person that's a non-believer that's not in the church, right? They have like a zero fake tolerance level. So they have like a center. And they know when genuine is genuine and they know when fake is fake. Right? So if it's not your ministry to be a people person and engage, do what God called you to do. Like that may not be your ministry, but if you are a person and they see you in the natural, and if I'm not speaking out of mouth, she came simply because I didn't force her. Every time she talks, she's like, I want to come. And I said, okay. Then she asked me a question, should I bring this? And I said, no, I just want you to come. I'm just happy to be here. But because of who I showed her, that brought her. And I've known this for almost a year, and that brought her. If you be the person, and you don't have to be perfect, but just be a genuine, good person, that's what's going to bring them, regardless. I see people, are you coming? Are you coming? And I have a friend that asked, and he passed away, unfortunately, and never made it. You know what I mean? But it's just who you are naturally. That's what's going to bring, because you can say it all day, like the lady called you out when she tried to say, no, you're not. They will know, and they understand genuine, and then they understand that that's fake. And that's definitely not going to get them in the door, because that's going to be, the foundation is going to be already faulty.
Okay, Reverend.
I just want to say, I think we also need to just recognize as well that church hurt is real. Some people leave because they've been hurt by whatever might have taken place in church. And kind of to what my auntie over there said, the thing is too, I think we should be more concerned about not so much what church they go to, but to make sure that they're right with God. So you can go, even if this may not be the place for you, as long as you go somewhere and you are safe. That's I think now we should really be highlighting again. Go somewhere. This may not be the place for you. You might have been hurt. You might have been. It could have been rough. It could have been really rough. But as long as you're going somewhere and you're finding God wherever that is.
And Deacon Johnson was talking about me the other day because we were in church school, and I said, we have a commandment that you're not supposed to put any God before God. Not supposed to put anything before God. And if Candy says something to me, and I feel like whatever she said keeps me from coming to church, then I've made her stronger than God. I'm not supposed to be focused. She's not supposed to be controlling me. God's supposed to be controlling me. Okay. So yes, there is some real pain. And just like I said, the sister who was loving enough to say to me, and she was a church person, she wasn't somebody from outside. No, you're not glad to see me. That was a moment of truth. And about the church pain, one of the best members I had in the church in Elizabeth, New Jersey. I mean, my first 6 months at that church, it was terrible with her. I mean, if I said good morning, she said good night. If I said left, she said right. If I said up, she said down. And one Friday night at the youth choir rehearsal, I don't even know why she was there. Boy, we